First of all, a principle. So a principle is a fact. It's a fact about how something works. So gravity has principles, aerodynamics have principles, and they work regardless to whether you believe in them or whether you know about them or any of that. They just work. They describe how something works. When the principles of aerodynamics were discovered, people were able to make things fly, for instance. So understanding principles is really helpful, but you don't have to understand them to have them work, because they work anyway. So like gravity, we all know that gravity works because if you drop something, it will fall on the floor. And if you trip up, you will fall on the floor. But we might not necessarily be able to explain the principles of gravity unless you're cleverer than me. The three principles, as we talk about it in this understanding, which we also refer to as the inside out understanding, are mind, consciousness, and thought. And the principle of each of those I'm going to describe next. So the principle of thought, for instance, it refers to the power of thought. It doesn't refer to what we know for ourselves, the little individual thoughts that we have all day long. It refers to the fact that we think, the power of thought. So if you like, the energy of thought. And it's important to know the difference, because if we think of thought, and we talk a lot about thoughts, we always think about what we think in our heads. So I like avocado and I don't like blue cheese. Those are thoughts, and you might describe them as preferences, but they're thoughts that I have about food. The power of thought is more to do with the fact that I can think rather than my individual types of thoughts. So it's the fact that thought is how I experience avocados and blue cheese rather than those individual thoughts. Then we have the power of consciousness. The power of consciousness is our ability to experience thought, experience life through thought. Without consciousness, we wouldn't know what thought was. We wouldn't be aware of it. We would just not have that at all. So consciousness brings thought to life. It's the soup. So in our curriculum, we have an experiment where we put a tea bag, which represents thought, into some hot water, which represents consciousness. And the tea bag changes colour when it's in the hot water. So if we were to put the tea bag into a cup without any hot water at all, nothing would happen to it. But when we put the tea bag into the hot water, it changes colour. So consciousness is the thing that enables us to experience thought. And consciousness is an awareness that expands and contracts, like the universe expands and contracts. And it does that all day long. No one has more expansion or contraction than anybody else. It just does it for everybody. And when we have a restricted sense of consciousness, we feel restricted. We get more focused, more narrowed down. We see less. And when we have a more expanded level of consciousness, we get wider, we see more, we become more aware. We see the sunset, we hear birds, we smell things, we become more conscious of our surroundings. So you've probably all experienced being really in your own head, we might describe it, where you can't see anything else. All you can see is the gnarly thing that you're concentrating on or worried about or anxious about. And that's a very contracted state of consciousness. When that expands again, we see more, we feel more alive. we experience more of our connection with other people. And then there's the principle of mind. So the principle of mind is to do with the intelligence behind life. I describe it as the essence of life. Everyone's born with it. Every living thing, being, and creature and plant life and everything has this intelligence of life. So we often describe it like mind is what informs flowers to turn their heads to the sun, and acorns to turn into oak trees, and creatures to be aware of when floods are coming and go to higher ground, and so on. So mind is a guide because it's the intelligence behind life. It's the essence, the thing that keeps us running. And again, we're all connected to that. We're all part of that, regardless to whether you believe in it or not. So that's a description of the three principles. They are what I would call a metaphor. If you've heard of Sydney Banks uncovered this understanding in the way that we teach it now. So he didn't invent it and he didn't discover it. He just uncovered something that has always been around and that philosophers have always talked about. I can't remember the year, but a long, long time ago, there was a psychologist called William James, and he was what people refer to as the father of American psychology. He talked about how psychology is both spiritual and psychological, that we have a way of functioning that have both those aspects, and that if we ever lose one or the other, then we've only got half the picture. And interestingly, what ensued from there was a whole raft of psychological learnings and teachings and so on that concentrated on just the psychology side and not the spiritual side. They actually started to concentrate on the symptoms. So people got interested in why are some people anxious and some people aren't, and why do some people cope with trauma this way and some people cope with it that way. And people got interested in that, and they started to develop cures and psychological ways of treating people. So you may have heard of Freud, for instance, who developed psychoanalysis and had people lie down and talk about their childhood and things like that. Now, what's really interesting about all the psychologists, Jung, Freud, there's many others, they all had something called an insight. So Freud realized that people were affected by what had gone on to them in their childhood. And then he developed a way of trying to understand that and then trying to treat them. Just as an aside, I know he wasn't a psychologist, but Bill Wilson, who fathered Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps, had an insight into his alcoholism. He had an epiphany, had a spiritual epiphany. He talks about it like that helped him to give up alcohol after years and years of suffering. And then he developed a way of treating alcoholics. And this is a pattern. So anybody that you look up or you think about, they will have had an insight. They'll have realized something about the human condition, and then they develop a way to try and help it. And the reason why I touch on that is, the reason why it's important is that what Sydney Banks did is, he was a normal man. He was a welder from Scotland. He lived on Salt Spring Island, and he had one of those epiphany moments. And he had this epiphany moment where, in that moment, he didn't talk about the three principles or anything like that. He saw what he called the true meaning of God. He saw that all human beings are one. And then he experienced a completely different life. He experienced love and joy and happiness in degrees that he'd never experienced before. he started to see that everybody has all of this within them. And so he realized that we have been looking at psychology back to front. We've been trying to take care of the symptoms of people's problems instead of looking at what's working, what's within them already that is whole and cannot be broken. And so he then went on by accident to inform a whole new paradigm of psychology. So psychologists came to him and said, want to know what this thing is? How come you're healing people? And he would talk to them about what he was seeing, and it was very intuitive. He didn't read about it and learn about it and then tell them. He was speaking from the heart intuitively to anybody who came, and people came from around the world, gurus and, as I said, psychologists and Buddhists and all sorts of different people who were suffering as well. The psychologists then, when they looked at this and they unpacked it, they realized, and Sid Banks realized as well, that this is pointing to the principles that William James first talked about when he talked about, if we understood the principles of psychology, then the world would be cured. And that what Sid Banks had uncovered were those principles. This is a personal opinion that I'm going to share now. I don't think it matters what the thing is called. The principles, the mind, thought, consciousness, they're just words. They are a metaphor to describe as much as we know about how life works. What Sid Banks was really pointing to was the essence of the principles and not to get caught up in the principles. Now, it is really helpful to understand as far as we can. We might discover more about that, right? In 20 years' time, we might be talking about something else. Who knows? Sid Banks didn't think so, but who knows? But what we do know 100% for sure is the principles as they're described work within every single human being without fail. And every single human being has a quiet space within them that can lead them to the answers to anything, whether that's business or relationships or mental health or finding your keys, anything. And to me, that's what the principles point to. So when we talk about the principles and we talk about mind, thought, and consciousness, it can get very confusing and very heady. If you listen to original tapes by Sid Banks and read his books, what he's pointing to is we know how to thrive. Every single human being knows how to thrive. And we also have this amazing power of thought. And we use that power of thought to be amazing in life and create things and do fantastic stuff. And we also use it to hurt ourselves. And often that's because we don't know how it works. So the principles as a metaphor is to help people understand how our psychological experience is working. And the principles as an essence is to help people recognize that they are thriving essences of life and they can be and do anything. They have the potential. So I love the analogy of the little tree that grows out the side of a mountain, and you think, or I've seen a sunflower growing on the top of a church, and you think, how is that even doing its thing? And it's all twisting around and it's got its sunflower head still pointing at the sun. Life finds a way. A lovely person that I worked with once said that to me. Life finds a way. And I absolutely know that that is true. Life finds a way, regardless to our circumstances, regardless to what we've done or what we haven't done, regardless to our socioeconomic status, regardless to what body or color of skin or whatever we happen to be born in. Life finds a way, and it's alive within every single human being.